First of all, I just want to thank the organizers for having me here. I looked through all the official talks, and my title is the only one that doesn't have the word well in it. So please don't hate on me. I know this is the private well conference, but we'll make some linkages that I hope are super helpful to you all in your work you do every day. Thinking about why should we care about septics if you're out there doing well work, well, there's about the same amount of wells, private wells, and septic systems in the US, and most of those are on the same property, right? So we don't have great data on either, depending on your state. Some of you have great databases, most of us don't, particularly when it comes to septics. There's around 22 to 23 million septic systems and around the same amount of private wells. So many people in the well world view it as a contamination source. That's what the septic is. And certainly I understand that can be true, but from my perspective, you are all out there educating, and you are educating people that every single day they are the operator of their drinking water supply and their wastewater system. None of them think of it that way, that they are operators, but they are the day-to-day operators of those systems, and so they really do need to acknowledge both of those systems, and sometimes making the linkage between them can help them better understand it. So, and I do just want, on the note of how many do we have, particularly around the septic question, the great news is just recently that question was added back into the census process. So the last time we had accurate data on that was 1990, and now the Community Needs Survey is once again asking the question, are you connected to a municipal system or do you have a private system? So in a couple years, even starting this next year, we're gonna start to get better data that I think will be useful to all of us. So with that, I am here on behalf of NOWRA. I mentioned I made a recent move. I've worked at the University of Minnesota for almost 30 years, and my entire career has been around wastewater treatment on a decentralized scale. NOWRA has been the organization nationally who's been doing a little of what we do in Minnesota. Universities do all kinds of other things. But NOWRA really is the one organization that really focuses on decentralized systems. So we have affiliates across the US, and I'll talk about some opportunities moving forward, because those organizations are great organizations for you all to partner with when you're thinking about doing education or just what resources and systems are out there. So, and our organization is meant to represent the entire industry, so it includes people like myself, but it also includes the people installing systems, designing systems, regulators. It's kind of that whole encompassing group. So in the little bit of time I get with you all, I want to just give a little bit of background about decentralized systems, on-site wastewater treatment systems, septic systems, whatever we'd like to call them, just to make sure we're kind of all on the same page about what they do and how they fit into our water cycle. And then most of the time, though, I do want to pass on resources and information that could help you educate the property owners you're all dealing with. So kind of first looking at that overview, and this picture is great because it shows the private well. So most of the systems I deal with every single day do not have a public water supply. They're not on rural water. They have that private well bringing in that drinking water into their home, and then that wastewater is leaving their home and going into some sort of septic system. The picture you see here, which is referred to in this EPA diagram as a conventional septic system, still is the most common system in the ground and still being installed. There are many alternatives to this. There are many systems that can achieve a much higher level of treatment, but for much of the US that has good soil, these systems are still being installed, and if they are designed and sited properly, can deal with a majority of the contaminants that are in our wastewater. All right, so what is a typical system? So every septic system out there starts with a septic tank. I will tell you one of my pet peeves is when people refer to septic systems as septic tanks, because that's just the very beginning. If you only had a septic tank, We would not want to see the outcome into the environment. But it's a super important part because it, again, starts the process of settling. For those of us from a more traditional wastewater treatment background, this is primary treatment, right? Solids settle, light things float. So what leaves that septic tank is much cleaner than what was entering. But pathogens in particular, nitrogen, all of that just passes through the septic tank relatively unchanged. Where a majority of the treatment of the primary contaminants we're going to talk about today occurs in the soil. How much soil is required still varies significantly across the US based on soil conditions, regulations, politics, whether or not they factor into sea level rise. There's just so many variables that impact that, but generally it's 2 to 4 feet of unsaturated soil before you hit a limiting condition. That limiting condition could be bedrock, it could be seasonally saturated soils, a permanent water table, something we know will not effectively remove those contaminants on a regular basis. And what I mean by that is no wastewater treatment system on the planet works perfect every single day, right? If it's prone to I&I, or we get that 10-inch rainfall, man, it's going to be hard on the soil, but we are looking for soil conditions that are unsaturated a majority of the time. So as I mentioned, there are many options for advanced treatment if you have challenging site or soil conditions. Once we start talking about beyond a single-family home, also the risk from those systems could be larger. So I know, for instance, right outside of the Twin Cities metropolitan area, a very dense community has a cluster system. It's receiving about 60,000 gallons of wastewater every day. That system is required to meet a nitrate level of less than 10 before it goes into the ground, because we can't rely upon groundwater dilution to protect people who have down gradient wells. Slight delay. All right, so what's in wastewater that we're concerned about? And again, because of time, I'm going to focus on 3 particular contaminants, pathogens, the chemicals, and nitrogen. We've lots of conversations about nitrate here, so I did want to make sure I talk about how our systems deal with that. So thinking back again to wastewater treatment in general, every wastewater system starts with primary treatment. That's again where solids settle out. After that, again, from small to large, wastewater treatment plants also have to do secondary treatment. That process, again, is going to dramatically reduce the amount of organics and oxygen requirements. It's going to convert typically ammonia to nitrate, sometimes also do some nitrogen removal, and you're going to do pathogen removal. The last step where things start to vary on many wastewater treatment systems is that tertiary treatment. How are we 100% removing pathogens? What are we doing with the nutrients? So certainly we are seeing more and more decentralized systems being required to do advanced tertiary treatment when they're in sensitive environments, whether that be to protect groundwater or surface water. So when it comes to pathogen treatment, how does a septic system do that? Not usually like you see here in the picture. So in the picture, this is a tablet chlorinator that's put after secondary treatment. So those are used in many states across the US, but the most common way we are dealing with those pathogens is with the soil. So a majority of the soil microbes that come out of our guts, we're used to being at a nice 98 degrees, and most of our soil isn't 98 degrees. So the soil tends to be an inhabitable environment for those microbes. So they have difficulty living in those aerobic soil conditions. So they are naturally disinfected. But there are systems that use chlorine. We're even starting to see ozone in some systems, UV disinfection built into some decentralized systems. So moving on again to nitrogen. Nitrogen again from septic systems can have 2 impacts. Certainly when we're talking about private wells, the drinking water concern is foremost, but when it's going into a surface water, if we're in coastal areas, it can also feed into algae and aquatic weeds. So how we generally treat these is it again depends on the type of septic system. The conventional system I showed in the beginning generally does a very effective process of converting ammonia to nitrate, but does not have the ability to do the second step of denitrification. There are systems that have recirculation built into them that basically have that denitrification cycle ability built into their design. And again, those are primarily used in areas where nitrogen is a concern. Very few single-family home lots, aside from coastal areas, are considering this because of the additional cost. So if we can rely upon well setbacks to meet a nitrogen limit, or we have lots of other inputs within the watershed, that may not be required. But we do have advanced systems that can meet a standard of less than 10, or sometimes even under 5 when it comes to nitrate. So the other big question often is about all the other chemicals and medicines that are discharged into on-site wastewater treatment systems. You know, I heard someone say yesterday, well, we really should stop them at the source. Can try, we'll keep trying. We'll keep trying to educate people about the products they put into our wastewater systems, but it's challenging. One of our issues with decentralized systems can first and foremost be the lack of dilution. If you're here in the middle of Missoula and you go on treatment for cancer and you're taking a chemotherapy drug, does the wastewater treatment plant know? They don't, even though they probably don't want some of those cytotoxins coming at them either. But when you're on a decentralized systems, you don't have a community of wastewater to dilute that out. So we can sometimes see with high-dose antibiotics, other really aggressive drugs, it can impact the microbes needed for the treatment in that system. We do also know that that many of these contaminants of emerging concern can persist in the environment. So some of these things are going to settle up and float in a septic tank. There's a growing body of research that shows the soil biota can break down many of these contaminants, but it is not bulletproof. It cannot deal with flame retardants. Right? There are some things that are going to persist in our systems, and certainly we know that septic systems are a source of some of those emerging contaminants. So with that, I wanted to move on to how can you educate owners about many of these issues. So we have been successful and in a fabulous partnership with RCAP. In developing materials. And the primary purpose of these materials is for people like you all to use them to educate property owners. So again, this work was funded by EPA. The first one was really targeting homeowner education. So the objectives, if you can get someone to attend one of these courses, is one, they understand what's going on in their system, right? If they understand, they're more likely to make better decisions in their home. They should describe the maintenance that they need, hopefully implement some changes in their home, and maybe even just able to solve basic problems with their system. So the materials that are available to you all are 4 modules that can be broken up, can be given all at one time if you could happen to get a homeowner for that amount of time. So it overviews the different types of systems, management, homeowner maintenance tips, and then a separate module about troubleshooting. So what's included as well, and those are meant to be customized for your audience. There's a training course overview and outline. There's a pre and post test. There's videos and drone photos. And all of those resources are currently available on NOWRA's website. So there was a user guide that came along with it. So you see pictures of it. We did bring 20 of them with today. So if you're looking to have one in person, I put them out at the back table. Through our last project, it was converted to Spanish as well. It is available as a PDF. Whether or not you're going to have the budget to print these out, it's always hard, but we have people now that are just emailing them out to interested or printing them in black and white or whatever it might be, but those are available online. So some of the content, so you can see the table of contents. Again, it starts, and so we integrated those EPA diagrams. We updated a few of them. We made a whole bunch more as part of this as well. So there's a section on troubleshooting and common problems. And I don't know about you all, but the last time I went to find a user manual, it's usually not to read about it. It's because I have a problem. We had some feedback when we were doing this that said, this next table I'm going to show you, which is the troubleshooting guide, we shouldn't put it in because it's all people would read. I'm like, well, you know, when the horse comes to drink, you have to give it the water, right? I mean, yes, I would love to educate them first, but if this is the part they go to and this is their reference, to me, that's all good. So it's some of the most common problems. So as we were kind of wrapping up that manual, though, how do people learn these days? Do they read 30-page manuals? If you're under 30, the answer is for sure no. Right? People want to watch videos, they want to interact. So we took that homeowner training program and we made an online training. And it's supposed to be fun. My idea of fun is a little sick, so I don't know most homeowners will think it's fun, but that's what this course is. It's free to take for anyone. So it might be something, again, if you're not super familiar with septic systems, you might want to go take it. So for instance, it has matching activities, right? So it has a thing where like flushable wipes show up, which that word shouldn't be put in front of the word wipe. But anyway, and does it go into the toilet or does it go into the garbage can, right? So they have matching activities, things like that. There's one, again, where the alarm's going off and then, you know, things pop up about what's the risk, what are the causes, what are the remedies, so. All right, so a little bit more about some other opportunities for you all. So I mentioned we have affiliates across the US, so the blue states are somewhere that NOWRA has an affiliate, and you will notice the yellow ones also have an affiliate. We're expecting Alabama and Hawaii to be joining in 2026 as well. So the reason why I mention this is our affiliates are already doing training. Most of their training is targeting professionals, but many of them are training realtors and property owners. Like, for instance, I know Missouri, the Missouri Small Flows Organization, is doing a training, I think, next week for realtors. And to me, there's such a logical connection to train about septics and wells at the same time. So if you reached out to Missouri Small Flows and said, we'd love to be part of your training and talk about wells, do you know what they'd say? Hell yeah, come on, we could use your help. We could work together. So. And they also have an annual conference, which is a great place to network. Having a booth there to talk about the resources and tools you all have is great. So some of them will have 100. Washington and Texas, you're talking about an exhibit hall of 1,000 people who are there to talk about wastewater, but we're all in the business of taking wastewater to make it clean water. So we're in the same industry. It's just sometimes a little bit of a different perspective. So again, NOWRA is just the mothership. We're not doing this day-to-day work, but our goal is to be supporting them primarily with material development and resources. So NOWRA also has a great online platform. That's where that free homeowner course exists. But we have over 200 courses that are more technical in nature. They're everything from an introduction to what septic systems are to you want to really understand nitrogen removal in septic systems. There's a class for that. So we do plan to take some of our current curriculum and update that. So there's going to be some new courses about O&M, working with small communities, and difficult sites. We also hold an annual conference this next year. It's going to be in partnership with our Colorado affiliate and held in the Denver area. So if, again, something you're interested in, registration will be out shortly. So we have additional projects that are going on. So that homeowner was kind of the first partnership we had with RCAP. The second one you'll see are these 3 projects you see here, which is about operation and maintenance. So these are more targeting professionals that are out there, but some of you regularly interact with operators as well, and this first one is the most in line with operators. The second one is what do we do when the conventional systems don't work? And then finally, there are thousands of communities across the US that do not have proper wastewater treatment. And for those communities, if they could have resolved their issues easily, they already would have. They're either for financial or site conditions, they don't have an easy solution. So it means they either have a complete lack of a system, there are still many systems that collect wastewater and discharge it illegally across the US, or they're just not properly treating that wastewater. So again, the O&M project is really focused on workforce development related to operation and maintenance. There's over 30 modules around different components that need regular operation and maintenance within systems. So it took this manual from 2008, which was a great manual, and it updated to this, which is a beautiful picture of the Rockies. So it was updated to reflect new technologies, approaches, and includes a lot more about troubleshooting when things don't work as planned. So these courses are also very extensive. They're really meant with someone with a background in wastewater treatment to pick up these training materials and be able to give the presentations. So what that means is they have extensive speaker notes. We have evaluation questions, homework, and that pretty comprehensive manual. I think it's like 300 pages, more reading than any of us would really want. So the second project was, again, identification of what makes a site difficult and then offer viable solutions to property owners and communities. So our audience here, again, is primarily septic system professionals, but also regulators who are often faced with helping property owners and communities come up with solution. So the approach, again, is the course materials provide an assessment of what are those challenges, how do we identify them, and then provide a range of solutions. So in different parts of the US, sometimes our regulations can create barriers, like we don't do that here. That's not allowed. And often for communities and property owners, that's not a great answer. They just need a solution. So this was really meant to be comprehensive in nature to make sure all of the options are on the table. So the last one, again, is around those small communities. We really want communities to, again, same kind of issue, have all the options on the table and have a really viable community process that they walk through. Community projects, when you're not talking about one system, and this certainly applies to water systems as well, it's not, you don't just snap your fingers and you have a new well or you have a new septic for a community. You actually really need to bring them along and educate them through the process. From my experience, these projects can take years from start to implementation. So a lot of modules, so you can kind of use them as checkpoints back in during some of those longer community process. And you'll notice these last two projects, the O&M one is already available. We're planning at the end of May that these last two modules will be released. So if you are interested in accessing any of these materials, we just have a simple Google form that we're asking people to sign up, mainly so we can track who has them. So if we make small changes in the future, we can let that same group know. The other thing I just wanted to mention is, does this work to combine, septic and well? And I think you heard from Becky yesterday that it can work, right? We had a project also in Minnesota where we partnered with our Department of Health to do training. And the great thing is we were able to give out free well testing kits. And I was excited because I really wanted people to come learn about their septics. And if the well test kit got them there, yay, right? But it did. It got a lot of people to attend that otherwise might not have. And so we did about half the class about septics, half about wells. And, we had them there for about 2 hours. And at the end of 2 hours, they were still there. Because what I have learned is any homeowner who shows up for one of those classes has a question. So we started just having them write their question downs on cards in the beginning. And then if you have 2 people, you can kind of make sure maybe during the course that you've addressed most of their questions, but they'll still have things they want to talk with you about at the end. All right, so lastly, if any of this was in any way interesting to you, love to have you involved as we move forward. So I think the interesting thing to me is EPA is investing more in these programs than they have in my 30-year career. So this is the 3rd grant now where EPA really has targeted money towards decentralized systems, which is awesome. So what are we going to be doing? The first one is we're developing a college course. So we're trying to take the principles that we all learned in our undergraduate and apply them to decentralized systems. The second one is there was a decentralized glossary. We're going to be updating that and actually making it online and searchable. There's already a version of this on the NOWRA website that we've started to pilot because I mentioned like how these are called all different things. There's so much terminology around decentralized systems that is inconsistent, so the goal there is to certainly have a more up-to-date tool. The last one, again, was like a 112-page PDF document. And again, I love Control F, but that being said, being able to go into a search and put it in and similar terms come up, it's just a more up-to-date way to do that, so. All right. So performance monitoring and troubleshooting is just taking that O&M to the next level. RME training, so that is really trying to target who is owning and operating, primarily community level systems. We're gonna be doing some focused tribal training, and certainly we're gonna be reaching out in the near future about partners around this one and the last one, which is around cesspools. So if you have those needs within your community, I'd love to hear from you. And then the last one is in the middle, which is a training program that is focused on regulators. So this is another area across the US that there are many regulators hired sometimes with a college degree, sometimes without not, that are put into the role of regulating septic systems with no formal training. So this is meant to be kind of a standardized program. It won't get into the nuances of local codes, but to give people that background. So if you're interested in any of that, we have stakeholder groups. The lift is pretty light. It's as light as, or as much as you can give. Starts with kind of reviewing the overall agenda for the training, which I think is the most important part, to have broad stakeholder involvement. And then if down the road you have interest in being more involved, we'd love to have your participation. So again, all these handouts are in your slide if you want to sign up now or sign up later. All right, and with that, Tom Groves is the Executive Director of NOWRA, and you have my contact information there. So again, thanks for having me. What do you find realtors are most interested in? So that depends on your state. So if any sort of compliance inspection is required at property transfer, that's what they're usually most interested in, is learning what has to be done and what the outcomes are of that. Do your training materials have targeted guidance based on soils and geology? So particularly that solutions for difficult site training, that's exactly what it does. It goes into not how do you do a soils assessment, but some of the challenging outcomes of soil-related work, and how do you deal with those. So the answer to that is yes. It deals with heavy clays, bedrock. Yep. Sometimes I'm told by private well users, they have been told by septic professionals, oh, they're water treatment devices. Yeah, so first of all, point of entry RO and septic systems do not match. That's the #1 takeaway. The amount of backwash water created. Under the sink units, no problem, because the amount of backwash is relatively small. The issue around water softeners is more challenging. Salt in general is not positive for microbes, so depending upon the efficiency of softeners, it can negatively impact it. There have been studies that have shown very efficient water softeners set appropriately for use in hardness will not impact it, but many times the default of the industry is we'd rather not have it going in. And I would say that's my preference, is to not have that salty brine going in. But if everyone who had a water softener going into their septic system caused it to fail, we'd have mass problems, because still most of them do. I do just want to mention iron filters as well. Iron filters can create challenges for septic systems as well, because they make a particulate of iron, and if that particulate is not settling out and staying in the septic tank, it will clog the soil if it gets out. So you either need to account for it in the design or route it to another source. Last question. Does the NOWRA website mention how to get a hold of trainers in each state? There is a tab under About NOWRA that says affiliates, and under that there's a contact for every affiliate. So if they have an executive director and or their executive team is listed, their emails are provided on that website. All right, thank you.